Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. Matt Cassel and Phil Perry will join me as the Patriots prepare for the Buffalo Bills in what's been a very difficult week in many ways and a unique week. And there's still a football game eventually to be played in the conclusion, perhaps, of the Patriots' 2022 season or the continuation. We'll bring Matt and Phil in right now.
It's the boys, it's Cassel, it's Perry, it's me, Tom Curran, and good news on this Thursday morning about Damar Hamlin. The Bills releasing a statement that Hamlin has shown, quote, remarkable improvement over the past 24 hours, still critically ill, but, quote, appears to be neurologically intact, and, quote, his lungs continue to heal. So as the days pass by and this podcast will stay up, improvements will, God willing, continue. And there'll be closure on at least when the game will be played. But thanks, guys, for taking the time to discuss something that is so tenuous in so many ways. But, Matt, I want to ask you, how hard is it to prepare for a football game that you're not sure when it will be played? And also with the hovering over your head aspect of, should we really be preparing for this game? Those guys are in virtual shock.
Right. It's a difficult circumstance, and we really haven't seen it in the NFL before. It's unprecedented. So when you look at the situation, I think for everybody that was involved out there, for the Buffalo Bills, the Bengals, and everybody watching the NFL community, it was horrifying, right? And it was horrific. And at the same time, as you move forward in this week, and we got more good news just this today, that it can be very difficult leading up to that point to get your mind right. But I think as football players, we're conditioned to deal with a lot of different adversities, whether it's circumstances outside the football stadium or circumstances inside the football stadium. And so you kind of have to steel your mind, and you have to understand that no matter what happens, you're probably going to have to go out there on Sunday and play. And so you have to block out those distractions, whatever they might be. And I know I'm simplifying it. I don't want to be insensitive to the situation that's taking place, but as a football player, you got to get your mind right and go in there and understand that the games are going to take place on Sunday, regardless of the circumstance. And somehow when you're inside the confines of that building, you've got to focus in on the job at hand and the task at hand, as hard as that might be. And as soon as that day is over, you have to then, be able to go out. And if you need help, if you want to talk to somebody, they have staff there. They have people there and resources that can help you talk through that.
Phil, nobody, I think, is better than Bill at articulating things. Do you agree with that? I mean, I just look back at the Aaron Hernandez situation in 2013, the amount of time that Bill spent explaining at the beginning of training camp for probably about 30 minutes, everything that went into that. And obviously the traumas involved for the families involved in the murders, and also how his team was processing it, would move forward, and the mistakes made. I mean, it was an unbelievable, I hate to use the word performance, but it was an unbelievable job done by Bill.
Yeah, so we know he has the capacity to be able to express what he and his team are feeling in a given moment. I also think he'll be cognizant of not making this moment about his team. And so while players are dealing with it inside of the building at Gillette Stadium, and I've been told it's been tough for players these last couple days in the conversations that I've had with multiple people in there, I think Belichick will be really aware of the fact that, number one, their thoughts are with Hamlin and his family and with the Bills. But number two, as Matt just alluded to, this game is in all likelihood going to be played. And you mentioned off the top, Tom, you might not know if you're a player, you might not know if it's going to be played or not. I think, and my guess is, they have to function as though it will be played because it's on the schedule, and they have to function as though, unless something changes before Sunday, all indications are we have to be ready to play a football game. So it's obviously incredibly unfortunate what the Bills are dealing with, and who knows if they'll be ready and willing to play on Sunday afternoon. But I think if you're Bill Belichick and the Patriots, you have to balance the fact that on the one hand, you want to make sure your players are feeling mentally healthy and emotionally healthy and spiritually healthy. And they have people on the staff whose jobs pertain to those areas of a player's overall well-being. So I'm sure those particular individuals, I'm thinking of guys like Daryl Nelson and Jewel Robinson. Jewel Robinson is the team chaplain. Daryl Nelson deals with player development, but he is really focused on the mental health of their team. So those guys will be busy, I'm sure, this week. But at the same time, if you're Bill Belichick, you have to get ready for a football game as well.
Yeah, and that's the essence of it is, okay, we just had a great talk. That was good. Pat on the shoulder, hug. Now go onto the field and hit that guy hard and make sure that he goes down when you hit him and play with a level of aggression that is suitable for National Football League play, in which the essence of the game is violence and impact. It is a dichotomy, and we are ignoring that fact to a large extent this week when we do talk about these aspects of preparing for the game and being sensitive to the mental health, because the next step is, Matt, all right, you good? Okay. Now go do that hard. Okay. Because we got to win. Are you going to be attuned? Are you going to be attuned to the game, Matt, in watching how the contact level is in what is a critical game?
Right. I mean, it's a critical game, and this is what we do for a living, and this is what we've signed up for. And there's injuries, and it's a violent sport, and you get hit, and you understand that going in. And this circumstance is outside the realm of what any of us ever experienced, because it's the human side of it, right? And it's also life or death situation, which we've seen horrific injuries. We've seen head injuries. We've seen guys blow out their ACLs. I've seen guys dislocate their ankles, and we've moved on. And that's kind of what I was talking about in terms of conditioning your mind. That's kind of the aspect of the game that you accept when you play this game. And then when you see something like that, it kind of hits home because of the nature of the injury and also the life or death situation, which we don't really encounter a lot when we're out on the football field until maybe after we're done playing, right? So, but at the end of the day, when you go out on the football field and you step out on the football field, if you're not going 100%, then you risk more injury, and guys understand that. And so when they get out there on Sunday, it's got to be 100%, and you've got to play to your full capacity, because otherwise you're putting yourself at risk, you're putting your teammates at risk, and you probably shouldn't be playing at that point. If you don't feel like you can go 100%, then again, I think that you put yourself more at risk than you're doing a disservice to everybody on that team.
I think too, Phil, there's 53 players on every team, times 32, times the practice squad players. There are coaches. There are people who've lived in this league for a long time. They understand what the essence of it is. And I'm building to a quote from Kayvon Thibodeaux, Giants rookie defensive end, who had a sack on Saturday, I believe, which left Nick Foles of the Indianapolis Colts twitching on the ground. And Thibodeaux, unaware that Foles was twitching, began to do a snowman. It was one of the most jarring spectacles you can see. A veteran player, a Super Bowl winner, Nick Foles, convulsing basically, and next to him a player celebrating that. Making it a little bit worse was the fact that when Thibodeaux returned to the sideline and was aware of the damage that had been done to Nick Foles, he gave the "I put him to sleep" sign. So this is what Kayvon Thibodeaux said this week as he continues to be asked about it. He says, quote, "What am I supposed to do now? Every time I sack a quarterback, stop and look and help him up? You don't play the game for anybody to get injured, but I play defense. They brought me here to be a savage and take over the game and to impact the game. We preach that impacting the game is affecting the quarterback. That's what I'm here to do." This is the game. This is the sport. And this is the mentality that players do equip themselves with, Matthew. You know better than me. And while the NFL and its owners, they want to serve it up around the world and make it appetizing and easy for advertisers and consumers to embrace, the real essence of this game and the mindset necessary is violence impacted upon other men, which is why the show will eventually go on. What happened to Damar Hamlin was what happens in the NFL writ large. Do you think players are going to have second thoughts in 2023 when they see something like this happen about whether or not they really want to be, quote, a savage, end quote?
I don't. I think it's the mentality of the defensive players and what they're taught to do from a very young age, and that's the nature of this league. Again, you sign up for it, you understand it. That's why you've played it throughout youth and college and everything else, and you understand that. Look, there's going to be aggression, there's going to be hitting, there's going to be violence, and at the end of the day, they're still going to go out there and do their job to the best of their ability because that's their paycheck and that's what they do for a profession. And it's not going to change the nature of how the defensive line attacks. Now, there's rules in place, don't get me wrong, that are trying to protect the safety of players, whether it's helmet-to-helmet contact or protecting the quarterback within the confines of the pocket and all those different measures in which they take to minimize injury, to minimize these big hits. But at the end of the day, there's no way to ultimately knock that part out of the game because of how you play this game and how you have to execute the game on a week-in, week-out basis.
Phil?
I'd just like to push back a little bit on Thibodeaux, because I think one of the things that, and I know we're just using him as sort of a window into the mindset of players, but I think one of the things that has been, and I hesitate to use the word nice, but sort of a nice byproduct of the entire Hamlin situation is that we have been given a window into the quote unquote brotherhood that players across teams seem to experience, and the respect that they have for one another. When you see the Bengals and the Bills come onto the field together and you see Joe Burrow hugging Josh Allen, and, you know, I don't think every player is wired in a way, to Thibodeaux's point, to injure and then celebrate a player's injury. No, we're not asking you to help the guy up after you sack him, but you don't have to do the get to sleep celebration. You don't have to do the snow angel on the field if you have any inkling that the guy may be seriously injured lying on the ground next to you. We've known a lot of defensive players here in New England over a long, long period of time. I'm sure I've encountered guys that would do those types of things in a game, but the guys that I know and respect, you know, did Gerard Mayo ever, you know, celebrate putting somebody to sleep, or Devin McCourty and all the hits that they've made over the course of time? No. So I think there's a large chunk of the NFL that, yes, of course, you have to play the game aggressively and you have to play it physically and you have to want to take these guys down. But I don't think there's the thirst to injure the way Kayvon Thibodeaux suggests there is.
Yeah. I mean, it's a dichotomy, right, Matt? I mean, you want to play it hard, you want to play it fast, you want to impact the other player to a point. And it's really hard to know where that point is, because that point, as Damar Hamlin's situation illustrated, that point can arrive on an innocuous physical, but generally innocuous play.
Right, and I think Phil brings up a good point. What I'm not saying that every defensive player is out there ever to try to inflict injury and take somebody out of the game, and they've got respect for you. And I'll tell you what, when I was in the pocket and I used to get hit, whether it was by Ray Lewis or Suggs or somebody like that, Jason Taylor for the Miami Dolphins, they'd help you up and say, "Hey, good, you took that hit like a champ," whatever it might be. But they're just playing the game with good technique, good fundamentals. They're coming through, but they're trying to make an impact on the game for their team. They're trying to win the ball game. And I think that's the mentality of most guys. It's not to ever go out and hurt individuals. And sometimes there are those outliers. There's those players that just have a screw loose and they go out there with the intent sometimes to do that. But I think as a whole, a majority of guys, a large majority of guys, they have respect for their opponent. They have respect for their game. They're trying to do it in the right manner, but they're just playing to the best of their abilities. And with that, sometimes guys do get injured.
Yeah, you're right. It's 32 times 53. That many players in the league. You gather together 1,700 people, and you're going to have somebody who says something, you go, "What? Don't say that. No, that's not how I feel." That's the nature of society. And I'm not trying to use Kayvon Thibodeaux as the example of, hey, they're all like that. But this is, again, writ large, a mindset that will exist and has existed ever since I started watching the game. Oh man, 50 years ago, almost 47. Phil, you did a story earlier this week scrutinizing the fact that there is the great likelihood that Matt Slater and Devin McCourty are playing their last games. What leads you to believe that to be the case?
Well, they both acknowledged that could have been their last game at Gillette Stadium the other day, that win against the Dolphins. And so for both of these guys to leave potentially in the same offseason, to me, would really represent an end of an era. You know, these are foundational pieces to the program. These are cornerstone guys for Bill Belichick. They're going to be red jacket Patriots Hall of Famers for sure. You know, I think there's an argument to be made, depending on how you feel about special teams, that Matthew Slater should be getting a gold jacket eventually. And, you know, not beyond their play, you know, both these guys have been captains since 2011, which is mind-blowing to me. And they really have, up through this season, if it is their final season, provided, I think, a guideline for the younger generation of Patriots to come up and eventually take on those roles that they've held for so long. And they've been very open about that, even last summer, talking about how there's a group of young guys that really need to, you know, we're not going to be here forever, is what Slater told us. And they need to carry the torch. And so it was fun for me to talk to players like Jacoby Myers, who said if he could be like Matthew Slater when he grows up, he'd be proud of himself. Or Brendan Schooler, who said that he plays every game for Matthew Slater. He plays for all his teammates, but especially for Slater, because he really paved the way for special teamers, and he's allowed him to have the job that he has. And if he doesn't go 100% on every play, he feels like he's doing Matthew Slater a disservice. Kyle Duggar talking about the importance that McCourty has had on him and his development. We know what a key piece he is for the Patriots now. When you lose these guys, Matt, you don't just lose really good players. You lose examples, you lose leaders. And I think that's going to be one of many questions that we talk about this offseason as it relates to this team.
Right. I mean, they've been the cornerstone of the leadership of this team for however long you just said. Since 2011, both these guys have been captains. And so when you have guys like that, and when I came into the league, I was lucky enough to play with guys like Rodney Harrison, Mike Vrabel. Tom Brady obviously was young in his career, but was a guy that was a proven leader on that team. Larry Izzo for special teams. And so those guys are impactful players, not just on the field, but off the field, how they impart their wisdom, their knowledge, their professionalism, how to go about their day-to-day. And it's not just their leadership in the locker room, it's their leadership outside that locker room. And so as those guys in the locker room have been able to experience that leadership, eventually time catches up to everybody and those guys move on. But hopefully they've set a foundation for those young guys to develop their own leadership style, to understand what it takes to be that guy in the locker room each and every day, holding the torch of going out, practicing hard in the weight room, in the meeting rooms, and then also how to behave and how to actually act as a leader and help your team be the best that they can be. And those guys have been such pillars and great examples of that throughout their entire career.
So think about this as you guys are talking, and Phil mentioned 2011. Here's a number of the situations that the Patriots have encountered on the field and off since the time these guys became captains. 2011, they go to a Super Bowl and they lose it. They didn't play well. By 2012, that was the last year for Wes Welker. The team again made it to the AFC Championship game, didn't win. 2013 offseason, Welker's gone, so there's chaos on the offensive side to a degree. And Aaron Hernandez is accused of murder and off the team. Changing, obviously, the locker room dynamic in a profound way and the way the players probably regard and think about each other. To have a player in their midst who was kind of a psychopath, sociopath, and processing that had to be hard. And then the next year, in 2014, they win a Super Bowl, but it was a very difficult year. The leadership necessary to start the season the way they did, end the season the way they did. You know, I don't want to go through every single event, but 2016, you have a team that's down 28-3 at a Super Bowl. I mean, I didn't even mention Deflategate and keeping the team on the rails. 2016, you go to a Super Bowl, you're down 28-3. You better have leadership in that game that comes from more than just the quarterback to weather that storm. 2017, dysfunction toward the end of the year with Brady, Gronk, Amendola, a splintering team in some ways. Malcolm Butler situation. It's just 2018, the team slides a bit in the regular season, but pulls together to win a Super Bowl. All the Brady stuff. And these guys have been the constant through the pandemic and the George Floyd situation. They are arguably as, if not more important than your Wilfork, Harrison, Bruschi, Vrabel, Seymour group because of the tumult that has existed for the last decade in so many ways. And that's not to, I mean, who was the most impactful leader? It's really hard to quantify. But when they leave, a link goes because there's nobody quite like them who experienced these things, right?
No question. And they have been the voice for this team for over a decade now. And both of those guys have really relished that role. You know, there's all sorts of clips. You could spend hours on the internet watching Devin McCourty pregame speeches for the defense and specifically the secondary and how he gets those guys motivated, or Matthew Slater post-game speeches and all of the huddles that he's broken down over the years since taking over for Teddy Bruschi as the yeah guy in the locker room after wins, but also after losses. I mean, he is, and they both are, I think, because they really are of a different generation, and because they've experienced everything they experience, and because they are so willing to share the wisdom that they've accrued over the years, you know, they really are the beacons of where this team should be going at all times, good and bad. And so
I think Bill looks at them as
valuable now, and then it's hugely valuable now. And the fact that you're not quite sure where you'll get that from next, to me is something that Bill Belichick's going to have to consider as he builds this team.
Sorry to interrupt you. That's exactly what Bill, I think, does too. During that situation with George Floyd, during the pandemic, you know, during the period of time when Bill had written a note to Donald Trump telling him what a wonderful campaign he'd run and how the evil media had victimized him. There's a lot of players in the locker room who were like, I know this for a fact, like, I thought we weren't supposed to be involved in making political statements here during this time, and Bill just made one. That went sideways. The team didn't go sideways, though, Matt.
Right, and that's the big part about great leadership. It's the locker room, right? It's the control over the locker room and somebody to look for in these times when they need answers, or when there needs to be communication that takes place, or they're going through a tough part of the season or a tough stretch. They look to their leaders, and those guys are the guys that has been the foundational pieces. But they also, you have to consider, they weren't always that. They grew into that role. Now they had it inside of them, right? It's something that's innate inside of each and every leader a great leader that I've ever been around. Because remember, Slater didn't always do the breakdown. That was Teddy Bruschi's deal. And then when he retired, Slater stepped into that role. So again, when you have great leadership and you're able to impart that knowledge and impart that wisdom and how to lead to those young guys, usually there's a few guys in that locker room that get it and they can step up into those roles. And that's what is the tough part, is the succession plan. But you never know who's going to show up to be your leader, because it could be the most unexpected individual that shows up and says, wow, this guy's got incredible leadership qualities, and guys just naturally gravitate to him. And then all of a sudden he becomes that guy in the locker room.
All right. Great stuff, guys, on that. It's we're lucky as hell, Phil. And we're lucky to have Matt here, too, for perspective. It's funny. This week is, you know, we're lucky to cover these guys. I've been lucky to do it for 25 years. I know Phil feels grateful. And it's funny. You feel grateful to the players, too, who go out there, Matt Cassel, having done it for as long as he did, and the guys who do it currently. I feel that way this week because they provide an entertainment product to me and everyone that allows me to make a living, opine on, have analysis for, and they go out and, yeah, they're well compensated for it, and they get a lot of cheers, and it's a brilliant realization of their dreams, but there is a price exacted. Like, Matt's sitting there in his Nana sweater talking about getting hit by Ray Lewis and Terrell Suggs. I can't fathom it. I'm like, holy shit.
Good times.
It's really funny. I mean, I appreciate you doing that for us because we get to talk about it.
You're welcome.
Can the Patriots beat the Bills, Phil?
Can they? Yeah. Anything is possible. It has to be a very exact set of circumstances. You know, you get a little bit of weather. You somehow cobble together multiple drives that looked like the beginning of the game and the end of the game against the Dolphins on Sunday. You know, I think there's an opportunity there for maybe a few turnovers, Matt. This is a Bills team that has been prone to turning the ball over, and the Patriots have been excellent at getting turnovers themselves. on that side of the ball. So are you going to probably need a special teams or a defensive score again in a game like this? Yep. 1, maybe 2. But again, that's not completely beyond the pale. I won't be picking the Patriots this weekend, especially just to get back to the conversation a little bit with Hamlin. I could foresee this being a real sort of rallying moment for this team. And maybe they come out incredibly hot because of all the emotion that is involved in a game like this one. So I don't love the Patriots in this matchup, but nothing's impossible.
Yeah, nothing's impossible. And again, it's going to take a big effort by nothing's impossible, but it's going to take a huge effort by the defensive side of the ball. They're going to have to continue to be opportunistic, get the ball. I mean, Josh Allen, he hasn't been as dynamic this year as he has in the past. He's had more turnovers this year than what he's had the last few seasons. And so when he gives you those opportunities, you have to seize that moment. You have to get the ball back for the offense. The offense somehow has to put together some drives and score points in this game. And I'm not talking about just field goals. I'm talking about touchdowns, but anything's possible. The one thing that we haven't seen from, I think, the New England Patriots all season long is all 3 units collectively playing well together in one game. And so this has got to be the game that they do it. So they've got to put all their effort into this one game, and it's a one-game season. We've been talking about this now for the last 4 weeks, that it's a one-game season, but this truly is the end of the year in which if you win, you're in. So whatever you have in your arsenal, pull it all out. Whatever tricks that you have, great. Defense has got to step up. Special teams got to step up, but particularly that offensive unit has to step up.
Lastly, as again, we proceed forward, what happens with that Bengals-Bills game and whether it's declared a no contest could have significant impact as to what the Bills have at stake when they take the field on Sunday. If that game is indeed declared a no contest, then a Chiefs win on Saturday against the Raiders would lock them in as the #1 seed, regardless of what the Bills do on Sunday, which, given the week that the Bills have gone through, if they have no chance at the #1 seed, it would at least inject into the conversation whether or not the Bills say, okay, we got a game next week. We've had a tough week. They're still going to play to win, but they might not be as full of intensity as they would have been otherwise. Unfair to point that out, Matt, or reasonable?
I mean, I understand where the conversation's going, but at the end of the day, I think for the Buffalo Bills, their mentality is going to go out and win this game. It's a division opponent. It's in the year. None of us really know how the league is going to handle the Bengals-Bills game, if it's going to be made up. So for them, their mentality has to be go win this game. But I understand that the conversation is there's so many what ifs right now surrounding the #1 seed, Kansas City. How Kansas City is going to feel about capturing the #1 seed based on the circumstances of truly they didn't earn that, so to speak, until you really would know the outcome of the Bengals-Bills game anyway. So how do they proceed with that? Is that something that they feel comfortable with, just saying, okay, by default, because of this horrible circumstance that took place, we grab the #1 seed as well? There's so many moving parts that you have to navigate through that it's hard to have that conversation.
All right, we'll watch those moving parts flow by and give you the best analysis we can all the way through. See you guys on pregame live and postgame live. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.